just gonna put my foot on the floor and I'm not lifting till I see God or a checkered flag.
Hello, and welcome back to Racing Thoughts, an IndyCar podcast. I'm Megan Dennis.
And I'm Meg Taylor. We're going to
And-
get started with our thermal preview for the week, I guess.
Yeah, this should be a little bit of a shorter episode. Thank you to anyone who made it through our very long St. Pete recap, and thanks to Cass for coming on and talking about the experience of actually being there at the race. I think it was really interesting to get to hear about, what were kind of the fun things about being on the ground at St. Pete. Building on that, I think going into news for this upcoming week, slow news week, quite truly.
You know what? I think we deserve a slow news week sometimes. I feel like there are times where we are just inundated with things. And so the fact that we have a slow news week is kind of like a breath of fresh air for once.
I would echo that. I guess to start us out, we did have some testing, so there were cars on track at our favorite place of Barber Motorsports Park in Birmingham, Alabama. It's the best, and we're going to be there soon.
We're going to be so soon. We can't wait. So it's always fun when we get to see the cars on track in Barber. And so, yeah, we had it broken down into the morning and afternoon sessions, as always. And according to the timesheets, we had one Mr. Will Power topping both AM and PM with the timings, which has been awesome to see. I'm not super surprised by like the timing sheets for both morning and afternoon sessions. They're kind of what I expected in terms of like who is where. Testing's testing. Doesn't mean anything unless it's my favorite.
No, exactly. I think the only thing that I'd really say was kind of surprising for testing was how high that Graham Rahal was in the morning session, as well as how low Marcus Armstrong was in the morning session. But then we did kind of see that course correct in the afternoon.
Yeah.
Graham was about middle of the pack. Marcus also about middle of the pack.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, we were missing quite a few teams. JHR wasn't there, CGR wasn't there. So, as always, it's testing. You take it with a grain of salt. Like, as Meg said, if your favorite driver does well, ooh, if they do bad, who cares? It's just a test.
Exactly. But yeah, I think it kind of tracks. Here's the thing with like Marcus Armstrong being lower in the morning sessions, like I just have a feeling he was doing a lot of stuff with like setups and things. He also he ran 35 laps and the most that someone ran was it looks like 40. So to me, that kind of signifies like there were a lot of different setup tests and, trying to figure out what the car is going to be like and all sorts of varying conditions that maybe they were just trying to figure it out. So, that's kind of where I was thinking he was getting that kind of low number from.
Again, I think it's all just so up in the air when it's just like, yeah, the reality is everyone's testing, everyone's doing different setup plans. Everyone's trying to use this as not just a way to get ready for Barber at the beginning of May, but also kind of prepare for thermal, really kind of figure out, what does their road package look like?
Yeah.
As opposed to the street package we just had for St. Pete. I don't know.
Point.
It's testing. That's at the end of the day. It's just testing.
Yep. Just testing. So, as we said, take it with a grain of salt, but it's always good to see, the cars on track. And it's always super exciting for us because, like we said, it's our favorite place. So it's always fun to see them go back and knowing the track as well. Like, oh, okay, that's always so fun.
Next bit of news, RRL has hired a second reserve and test driver, which I think is very interesting as to kind of why. They've had Yuri Vips on their staff in this reserve role for probably the last 3 years, I believe. So they brought in Toby Sowery. Those of you who were around last year, you may remember the name very briefly. I think he ran 2 races for Dale Coyne.
Mm-hmm.
Decent enough, nothing to write home about, but kind of typical Dale Coyne race. And so, I think it's great that he's getting this shot, but I'm also just kind of like, for what? You already have someone who's doing this job. You don't seem like you're going to have a seat opening anytime soon. So, it just feels like an interesting move from RRL there.
Yeah, I think it's just something that we're going to have to keep kind of like in the back of our mind moving forward of just like, all right, what does RLL have planned for him that, like what is he going to be able to do for them that Yuri Vips isn't able to do? Like what's going on there? But again, we don't have, any information about that kind of stuff. So we'll see, I guess, as the season continues and what is Toby Sowery going to be able to do?
Exactly. Next bit of news rolling on, we have 2026 dates, which is kind of crazy to talk about.
Gee.
We talked about it when it was announced, maybe October
Mm-hmm.
time, I think, of they were bringing a race to Arlington and to the kind of Dallas Fort Worth area. We officially have those dates of March 13th through the 15th, 2026. I think it's really going to be very interesting to see what that means, how the calendar shakes out. Does this mean we are opening in Arlington? Or does that mean St. Pete's going to get pushed before that? Like
It's true.
I don't know. I think it's going to be an interesting thing to see what does this mean for the calendar?
Mhm.
What does this necessarily mean for are we going to lose a race? Are we gaining just another race? Is something
Yeah.
rotating off? I don't know. I think this is going to be good. We've talked about that before, how this has
Yeah.
the benefit of being a really good race, at least on paper, and at least from the mock-ups. And the idea of getting, Jerry Jones behind it is a great
Mhm.
sign, but it's also one where what is this going to mean for our existing calendar and how that's going to change things?
Yeah, that's so true. I don't know why. Like when I saw like, oh, they're doing the Arlington race. Fantastic, excellent. We're bringing IndyCar back into Texas and, I'm really excited for how all of this was kind of planned and how it's been promoted. I for some reason did not think about the possibility that it might replace another race on the calendar. I just like automatically assumed for some reason that it was just going to be like an additional race in it, like with all of the other ones that we have consistently. So I'm like, oh, what race would it replace? I don't even know.
I don't really know either. I mean, it would have to be a street race, but they're not getting rid of St. Pete. They're not going to get rid of Long Beach.
No,
Like Toronto, maybe, but I doubt that if they're wanting to expand into other markets.
I
I
love
mean,
Toronto too. That track is so like one of my favorites. I love it.
okay. I don't
Hmm,
agree, but okay.
interesting. Why don't you agree?
Turn 7 of Toronto, where historically is nothing but crashes every single year.
Yeah, but that kind of makes it interesting.
Or very dangerous.
I mean, like, yes, dangerous. I'm not saying I ever want any of them to crash or get hurt or those things, but I think it brings out cautions. It brings out, different strategy plays. And as we know, I love to think about the strategies and stuff like that. So, it kind of shakes things up and puts things into a very unexpected thought process for teams and for drivers. So I always like to see how they kind of shake down after that. And I
Like,
also just really like the track through Toronto. I think it's a really pretty vibe. And also like Hinch's hometown.
but no, I don't know. I mean, we have the room in the calendar to be able to add it as an additional race. Like right now, we have like 3 weeks of April with like nothing.
Nothing. I think it is just going to be added in and I hope that I don't eat my words after saying that, but I think just having it added in as an additional race instead of replacing it is going to be better overall for the sport. And, I don't think that removing a race is going to be a good idea. I'm not saying that IndyCar should kind of take the route that F1 has done, where they've just added so many races to the calendar to the point where it's like, oh, this is concerning for the health of their drivers, but also like the health of the teams and like the personnel that are there. But I think Indy has the capabilities of adding in more races without oversaturating the season and like making it impossible for drivers to, go and do other endeavors like the way that Pato's the reserve driver for F1 McLaren and he's able to like go do his other responsibilities as a result of, the Indy season ending and stuff or whatever the case may be. Not saying that we want an over saturation of races on the calendar, but I do think that there's room for more.
I mean, there's definitely room for more because right now the reality is we start in March and we finish in August, and most of the year that means there's not any cars on track. But I think it's also one important thing to point out is too that the dates are not coinciding with Sebring. Sebring 12 hours is happening currently as we are recording on March 15th.
Yep.
That will not be an issue for next year. So that means our drivers who go and do Sebring, Cal Kirkwood, Alex Pillow, others, I think those are the only two off the top of my head. Hinch is there driving and
Yep.
not he's a commentator, so still applies. That's a positive thing, is that they'll still be able to do that IMSA race without it being an issue. All right, so last bit of news we have for this week is that there has been a little bit of controversy is not the right word, but a little bit of anger from the sponsors, I think kind of rightfully placed, in that all these sponsors who pay to be like on the top of the car on that top shot that you can see when they do the onboard cameras, they're all a little angry because this year, and what we saw in St. Pete is where they have positioned that onboard camera above the driver's head instead of years past where it almost looks a little bit down and you're able to see those sponsors logos and everything where it's angled now. You can't see them as much, so you have a lot of sponsors who are kind of really annoyed about the fact that they've spent a lot of money to get this primary placement on these cars, and it's no longer something that you can make use of as that sponsor thing. So I think that'll be interesting to see if that changes from St. Pete going into thermal or even going into Barber following that, to see if they kind of change that camera angle to kind of appease the fact that like teams have to pay a lot of money to have access to these IndyCar cameras. Some of them did not work at St. Pete. Majority was making, teams and their sponsors very annoyed because like, well, we paid for this and now we're getting nothing out of it. And then you add into the fact that the ones that it did work, you couldn't even really see those logos unless they had just like one logo that they could kind of attach to the right spot. So nothing, I think, groundbreaking for us as fans, but I do think from the IndyCar kind of broader perspective is kind of interesting to see what's that going to do, if anything, for this upcoming race.
Yeah, I don't really have much to add on to that. I think it's, the sponsors are rightfully upset about that. If they're paying all of this money to these teams, they should be able to see all of that. Who knows what that's going to mean for moving forward?
Yeah, so pretty much that's news for this week. Slow news week. Nothing earth-shattering, nothing groundbreaking, but sometimes that's nice.
Yeah, we deserve a slow news week sometimes.
Going from that, we are going into thermal this weekend. It is, I believe, our second year going to thermal. This year is going to be a lot different from those who experienced whatever that $1 million challenge of 2024 was.
Thank God. That was
Mhm.
the weirdest experience last year. I'm so glad it's different.
Yes. So thermal this year, it's a 3.67-mile circuit with 19 turns. It's going to feature 65 laps. It's honestly kind of short as far as laps go, but a lot.
Yeah.
For those who did watch last year and don't really remember, or who didn't watch and may not be familiar with it, last year's thermal was not a typical race in any account. It wasn't for points. They were competing for $1 million, but it was a very, very, very weird format where they had like multiple heats, and then if you didn't qualify high enough, you didn't advance, and then it was very kind of like a karting challenge, quite honestly, or like a swim meet. Is kind of the
Yeah.
vibes of it.
Yeah. That's a great way to explain it.
And so it's like only the top 12 made it to the actual feature race. Alex Plo won, got the $1 million. Woohoo, good for him. So thankfully, while it is counting for points, and a lot of people are not particularly happy that the thermal race is counting for points, but it is. Love it, hate it, that's a fact. At least we aren't having to deal with it being a weird race and counting for points. So at least they did rectify that, at least a little bit. I don't know. That's really all I got for thermal. As
Yeah.
far as it goes, there's not a lot to go into it on it. So I guess from that, Meg, what are your predictions?
Well, I'm always going to say my go-to until it is true. Haha, that rhymed. I'm always going to say Pato Rossi and Kyle. I want to see that podium at some point in my life. I need to see that podium at some point in my life. But outside of that, I think I want to say Colton is going to be up there. I don't know. I'm throwing spaghetti at the wall and seeing what sticks. But I also have a lot of confidence in Colton's abilities. And we talked about it last episode. We talked about it so much last year of just he constantly is running like very consistent races and then just like one random thing happens and then it's just like done for him. And so I want to see him run a really smooth race. And I think if he does have a smooth race, he's going to be kind of up there. I think Will Power is always going to be kind of up there. And who's going to be my third? I don't know. Who's going to be my third? Scott Dixon. Why not? Scott Dixon. We're rolling with the 6-time champion. That's what I'm saying. Scott Dixon to win it all.
Bold. We never make those type of claims on this podcast.
That's just the vibe we're rolling with for today.
Fair. I will say I also had Scott Dixon in my predictions as well. While I do think Andretti has the chance to be really good, they tested there with Prema January, maybe. And I know, like, especially Kyle Kirkwood had a really good test there, but different conditions, different day, all that plays a factor. I think if you look at what we saw from St. Pete when we look at last year for this track, I really think it's going to be like Alex Plow, Scott Dixon, Felix Rosenqvist. I think it's going to be that Chip Ganassi, Meyershank conglomerate
Yeah.
doing really well. I think my one midfield to watch this week. Again, we don't know what we're watching them for. We're just watching them.
That's a
Who
good
is my
point.
heart telling me this week? I really don't know. I don't know if anyone from that mid pack is speaking to me. My heart says go with Stingray always, but that doesn't even feel right.
What do you feel about Callum Ilott? What do you think he's going to do?
I think that's hard in the sense that, like, I don't know if the Prema car has it, quite honestly. I have no doubts in Callum as a driver. I think he is very good.
Mhm.
But what we saw in St. Pete, what the Barber tests were showing, I'm very skeptical of that Prema car right now. And I
Yeah.
think Callum is going to extract everything he can out of it.
Mhm.
I don't know how well that's going to translate, especially to a place like Thermal, which, like, yes, it's a road course, but I feel like it's a road course with an asterisk of it's just kind of a weird place.
It is kind of a weird place.
Is that it? Do we have any other thoughts?
Our championship standings,
Um,
nothing's changed.
yeah, but we'll go through it one more time. Our
All
top
right.
10, as always. Okay, so our top 10 in our standings, just to wrap us up. No, it has not changed because we still have only had one race. But in 10th place, Alexander Rossi. Ninth, Rinus VK. 8th, Christian Lundgaard. 7th, Felix Rosenqvist. 6th, Marcus Ericsson. 5th, Kyle Kirkwood. 4th, Joseph Newgarden. 3rd, Scott McLaughlin. 2nd, Scott Dixon. And your leading IndyCar champion in first to continue this is Alex Poole.
So I think that honestly brings us to the end of our episode. Like we said, nice and short and sweet. Once again, thank God it's been a slow news week. So yeah, that's all I got.
Next episode, we'll be back. We'll be recapping Thermal. I think Cass is going to come back and join us again for that as well.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm going to be out of commission for that weekend. So shout out to Cass for not only all the work that they do with our socials, but for hopping in when necessary. It's always fun to pick their brain about what's going on in this world.
exactly. All right, follow us on socials as always. Instagram and TikTok, Racing Thoughts Podcast, and our Twitter or X or whatever you want to call that website this week is Racing One Thoughts. And we'll see you next time.
Bye.